Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle O'Donoghue reporting for Medscape. Joining me today is Dr. Rob Ostfeld, who has been a leader in the field of plant-based nutrition and also for trying to implement change within his own hospital system in regards to the food that's delivered. And he'll also be a discussant for one of the late-breaking clinical trials looking at really a grocery-based type of intervention. And I think that it lends itself to just a natural topic of conversation, which is not so much necessarily what is the right diet for our patients, because I know that there are differing viewpoints, but ultimately it comes down to, we as physicians are often confused on the subject. There's very little training in medical school, as we know, and the headlines are all contradictory each and every day as to which is the best diet to follow. And ultimately, how do we get the education not only for ourselves, but also to our patients? Where do you see that going in general?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. And I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, dietary intervention or dietary change is just so critically important for our health, for our patients' health, but maybe the attention or educational time spent teaching us about that is somewhat limited. So it's, and actually the leading cause of disability or disease is an unhealthful diet. So really making dietary change is critically important. And the American College of Cardiology guidelines are really very much aligned around eating more plant-based foods, more vegetables, more fruits, more whole grains, beans and lentils, and of course also incorporating some fatty fish as per the guidelines. And this is really backed up by multiple sort of basic science studies, test tube studies, observational studies, randomized controlled trials. So I know there's a lot of noise. I know there's a lot of confusion, but eating a smartly or minimally processed, predominantly plant-based diet is quite healthful. And there is a really interesting analysis by Dr. Bundy, published in the Journal of the American Heart Association in 2021. And they first tried to estimate the dietary quality in the US, and not surprisingly, it was quite poor. They looked at 5 healthy lifestyle diet measures. One is consumption of at least 4.5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, at least 3 servings of whole grains a day, low salt consumption, low sugar sweetened beverage consumption, and fatty fish at least twice a week. And if you had 4 or 5 of those, you had an ideal dietary pattern. 0.7% of the US had an ideal dietary pattern, and about 75% had a poor dietary pattern. But they estimated if everyone switched to an ideal dietary pattern after 1 year, cardiovascular event rates would fall by a little more than 40%. So there's a lot we can do, and it's all of the above to help our patients, just as you know every single day. There's sometimes procedures that are helpful, there are medications that are helpful, and lifestyle too. It is all of the above to help people, and of course completely consistent with our American College of Cardiology guidelines.
Yeah, and the importance of lifestyle should just be underscored. I mean, I think that many cardiologists understand conceptually that that is something that they need to be recommending to their patients. But honestly, it often is just them saying, and think about your healthy lifestyle.
Right.
So how do we really affect change? And I led off by saying that at your hospital system at Montefiore that you had been a proponent of really changing the menu there. And is that sort of a teachable moment when we think about how to get our patients to start eating more plant-based foods? If they're being hospitalized for their myocardial infarction, might that be the golden opportunity that we're looking for?
Well, I think you've hit on the key issue. How do we make the healthy choice the easy choice? And there's all kinds of ways to hopefully come at it, but it's a steep lift. We're not good at that, and we're not good at behavior change. So I think you're right that when patients come in, hopefully we can use that as a teachable moment. And it's one thing that we've had the opportunity to do at Montefiore, where now we have something called the cardiac plant-based diet that you can order through our EMR system, and the patient can get a plant-based diet. We can also give them a handout explaining why it might be helpful. We also have a documentary film playing on continuous loop on one of the inpatient TVs talking about a healthier diet with Spanish subtitles for free for patients. to kind of help outsource some of the education because no one has time. It's really quite difficult. So that's a wonderful teachable moment, and it can be reinforced by the medical system, by the interventional cardiologist who's very busy, putting in the stent for the myocardial infarction, but they could say, we had a wonderful result of the stent, and here's some medications you're going to need to take, and we really need you to eat health food to help protect your heart. And the nurse on the floor can reinforce it, and the PA on the floor, and the cardiologist around in the next day, all little bits. And we know that you don't have to go all the way with dietary change to see improvements in outcome. In fact, a wonderful study by Dr. Song, they looked at if you just replace 3% of your calories from animal-based protein with 3% of calories from plant-based protein, that's associated with living longer. So every little bit counts. So I think our intervention at Montefiore has been helpful to at least be a teachable moment and plant a seed in patients. Fortunately, they also serve this food in our cafeterias in a number of the hospitals, and the director of food services tells me that it's profitable. So that's really wonderful and great that we can have that for our staff and other people that are coming through. And as you mentioned earlier, of course, there's quite a sea change in New York City now, and we have our mayor, Eric Adams, who is plant-based, and he's had wonderful health turnaround because of that. And he's a very strong advocate for nutrition and has helped through the HHS Health and Hospital System, which is Bellevue and Jacobi and other big hospitals in New York City, develop a health and lifestyle program that is quite robust with Dr. McMacken at the helm of that, and has created plant-based or vegan Fridays for patients in school. So it gets the conversation going, it gets people talking about it. It's just another bite at the apple, in the big apple, of us being able to bend the curve.
Yeah, because I think people just become overwhelmed when you say, plant-based diet. They say, wow, I could never do that. And so it is so important to put the food in front of them, put them in, put that menu choice in front of kids, or, have that option at the hospital, and help them see that it is actually a very easy diet to follow once you're sort of have that mindset and you're willing to make the change.
I totally agree. And with anything, there's a bit of a learning curve. If you go to work at a new hospital, you have to figure out where the bathrooms are and where you park. And so there's a little bit of a learning curve when you change your diet as well. But society is changing, and there are a lot more plant-based options. There are thousands of recipe books, lots of options in the supermarket, in the produce section, wonderful types of food that you can eat. So the activation energy is getting lower and lower. And quite frankly, in our program in the Bronx, 12 years ago, I would mention plant-based nutrition to some patients, and they would look at me like I was from Mars. They've never heard about it. And one borough south in Manhattan, they touch. There are, a lot of people having smoothies and green juices and things, but it might as well have been different planets. But now, 10, 12 years later, they don't look at me like I'm from Mars. They've heard about it. Society is changing.
I think it's really the opportunity I think that we've been hoping for is getting better supports in place. And you talked about, the hospital-based changes that are being made. You're going to be a discussant for a trial tomorrow that was led by Dr. Dylan Steen, where he partnered with a grocery chain. And what I liked about it is, looking at adherence to diet after different forms of teaching. And one of those interventions was actually going through the grocery store aisles with people and, helping them make those right choices. And I think that's ultimately what we really need to be moving towards. All the money we spend on pharmaceutical products, when insurers really could be shifting some of those dollars into really grocery-based interventions that could have a profound effect as well.
It's helpful for health reasons, and as you say, it's incredibly important for fiscal reasons. We spend so much of the GDP on healthcare, 80% of it on chronic conditions, many of them that are preventable or improvable with a more healthful dietary pattern. And creative initiatives like Dr. Steen has done are ways to help get us there. And we are up against headwinds. There are vested interests in place that want to have us eat things that maybe not be so healthful. So it's important to continue to build momentum, to continue to build data, to continue to pursue a variety of interventions. And Dr. Steen has really been at the forefront of that, of wonderful and very interesting study, really leveraging a connection between research and retail.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in this area. I continue to eagerly watch to see what's going to be done next and trying to make changes at our own hospital as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Signing off from Medscape, this is Dr. Michelle O'Donoghue.